It's always good to say Merry Christmas to all. I find that Christmas is a wonderful time of year. I think that Christmas is a wonderful word. I think it's sad that people who are academically inclined are making fun of Christmas. For words do not carry inherent meaning, they have usage. This time of the year we should leave the concepts of just one definition of Christmas. And we need to find our way with something good to say about a day in which we are simply talking about one who did exist historically, and that would be Jesus Christ. We have more language documents. We have thousands upon thousands of language documents, ancient language documents that do suggest that we do or did have, namely one called Jesus Christ. And so for the sake of honesty and for the sake of historical accuracy, let's actually say that whether you believe that Jesus is a myth or not, there are writings concerning Jesus Christ. And it's just true that some people in history who make and nuance a magnificent point like Jesus Christ did concerning love, we do respect them, and therefore we do actually celebrate their birthday. And so Merry Christmas, not Happy Holiday or anything like that, but I'm simply saying Merry Christmas. Now you can spin it however you would like, but please don't censor me. I love the fact of dealing with history that is honestly, and I like the fact that historically Jesus Christ was a big game changer, not a small one. And so if we're going to have any kind of respect for any other individual, and we do, I would suggest that we also have respect for Jesus Christ. And so I think that I've made a point or two, but I'm not here to argue for Christmas in the sense that most people would suggest. It's certainly true that he did not, there is no evidence that he was born on December the 25th. And it's also true that we don't have a clue as to his birthday nor his birth year, but that's superfluous to the argument. We do have many in linguistic science working day in and day out, trying to reconstruct the languages and the documents, these manuscripts that do give us great benefits of how to work, that is, to how to move forward with this idea of Christ. And the reason that I nuance the idea of Christ, because the idea of Christou, when I say Iesu Christou, it's not equivalent to saying, and please let me just take that last word, Christou, it's not identical to Mashiach in Hebrew. It's not identical in any sense of the word. And there's something about this read called the New Testament that I think most people fail to understand, because I'm very much a person who is going to celebrate not just Christmas in a generic sense, but I'm going to celebrate Christmas as a moment in history that represents something that's very meaningful to me. And here's why. If I look at one historian, now his writing of history is difficult in that he does record, and it's true that his recordings are not kept intact. In other words, we do not have an autographa of the book of Luke. But if we examine the writings of Luke, both the Acts of the Apostles, and I'm talking about the good and the bad and the ugly of those Acts, let's also look at one of his other writings we call the book just Luke itself. When we examine chapter 1, we're going to find this historical setting, and I'm not going to read much of it because I disagree with much of the meta-language here, and I don't want to spin a lot of hyperbole. I think that all of us have heard the stories of Magic Jesus for too long, and so I can laugh with the best of them concerning Jesus Claus. because I think this time of the year we mostly celebrate Jesus Claus, and we picture him as the magic Jesus who came along and took away all of our sins and all of our problems, and now we're going to die and go to heaven. But I don't believe any of that hyperbole. But I do believe that this particular document, if read, can benefit us much in every way. Here's my point. If you read chapter 1 from verse 1, you're going to find that there is much that's being stated in the Greek text that's much different than what we have in our English versions. But by the time that we get down to verse 17, we have a powerful point that's made, and it's attempting to nuance not a minor point, but a major point. And the point is this. Let me read verse 17. And he will go before him in the spirit and power of Elijah. I'm not claiming that Elijah is one who lived, because the ancients would do this. They would simply take a name, and for the sake of making this name into some kind of iconic, etc., they would do so. And so we don't have to prove that Moses actually was or Elijah actually was. We just need to understand what these people are wrestling with. They're wrestling with oral transmissions. They are not actually spinning what an abjad says, because no one has a clue. Not even those people back in those days had an idea as to what these abjads stood for. But what is stated in verse 17, he will go before him in the spirit and power of Elijah. So it's not important that we understand that this Elijah actually is, but there is rhetoric that is based upon oral transmission that these people in this context are having to deal with. When we look at that which has been orally transmitted, and now we have written documents. In other words, we have to wrap our minds around this. We had an oral Torah and then a written Torah. And the writings of the Torah were put into a writing system that failed. Yet we carried the traditional models of the Torah forward. The Catholic models and the Protestant models are not even remotely similar. That is in modeling. Now here's a case for making good news. And I'm going to have to ask for some cold water also to go along with my nice drink. In verse 17, here's the good news. I keep contesting that the good news isn't that Jesus died. The death of Jesus was a murder. There's no good news in murdering anyone. There's no good news in crucifying anyone. In fact, the wisdom of God, as Paul speaks, he said that the church was going to rise up and make known to the rulers and the authorities what the good news was, what the wisdom of God was. In fact, Paul claimed if the rulers had understood the wisdom of God, they would have never crucified Jesus himself, which indicates the wisdom of God never had any intention of having sweet Jesus crucified. When I read verse 17 of chapter 1 of the book of Luke, it states, "And he will go before him in the spirit and power of Elijah, and turn the hearts of fathers to their children." Why this is so good is in what it's suggesting. I want you to listen to this carefully, and I'm going to go through this slowly so we can have a reason to get happy, a reason to say we certainly do have good news. As I stated last week, the gospel is not static. The gospel isn't static. It's continuing to, it's a process in which we can discover. And the reason that I'm arguing that the gospel isn't static It's because Jesus never presented the good news as something static, nor did the Apostle Paul. However, the church wanted us to become parked in that mindset of theology, that is, in a static belief. Let me see if I can work on this for a while. Let's read verse 17 again. And he will go before him in the spirit and power of Elijah to turn the hearts of fathers to their children. Now you can see in the text, if we continue to read, it says, and the disobedient to the understanding. So he's trying to draw the parallel that the children no longer need to listen to the parents. No longer do certain people need to listen to others who have gone before them. In other words, let me see if I can stop here and make a point. There was a custom. And the custom was to carry on the tradition of the fathers. And here, Dr. Luke, a historian, he actually challenges the idea of carrying on the doctrines or the traditions of the fathers. And this is being done through the means of individuals like Zechariah and his wife, Elizabeth, because they will bear a child, his name will be John. And this will be the cousin of the one that I speak about, Jesus Christ. And so we have one who is a forerunner, and this information is given to him, and he makes this statement. Now I want you to listen to this. To turn the hearts of fathers to their children. Let me see if I can make a point that needs to be made here, because when you look at all of the extra biblical literature, and that's important when trying to understand context, you're going to find that these people lived in a day in which what Dad said went, not just for 3 or 4 years, but for many years. And so I want you to picture, if you will, a model. Let's compare this to our educational institutions. All of us, hopefully, went through grade school, and we had teachers. And those teachers would tell us to hush. In other words, hush, little Johnny, don't talk during class. I simply want to give you some things to do, and I want you to memorize all of these things. In fact, in grade school, for the most part, teachers never encouraged their children to have debates, because these debates will turn into what? They will turn into fussing matches. So here we have a group of teachers, that is in primary education, they will actually take their students, memorize this, like the times tables. They will get them into that kind of educational process. Why? Because they know that if they can get little Johnny to memorize X, Y, and Z, that will stick in their mind. However, calculate in the fact that these children will move on. Calculate the fact that these children don't need to practice just memorizing 2 plus 2 equals 4. For in time, another teacher will say 2 plus 2 equaling 4 is only valuable if you're using base 10. Because if you change the base structure and say 2 plus 2 equals, if you change the base structure to base 4, 2 plus 2 then becomes 10, not 4. So in base 10, 2 plus 2 equals 4, but in base 4, 2 plus 2 equals 10. I'm simply saying in time things change, that is for the student. By the time that child arrives in a university somewhere, that child will be faced with the fact that this is not a place where we are so parked. We are going to encourage debate. That's good. Our universities today are full of young students, brilliant minds who are challenged by the very fact that we are debating. Encouraged by professors left and right who are encouraging the process to move forward. We need to think and rethink, and we need to have issues that we need to think about, and actually programs and different people put into the category of discovery, exploration. What am I saying? I'm saying in the workplace, it's wonderful to be able to go to work and have the kind of dialogue which people can actually speak, similar to having a rational debate. But it's unfortunate that sometimes people go to work and they work for bosses who treat them not as adults, but they treat them. I'm talking about bosses, people over you. Bosses actually treat some people in some companies like they are still children. Don't talk. Do this. Parrot this. It's all about parroting. When we go and leave these models of businesses that do this and we examine church life, we also find that in church life, what has been encouraged isn't the university-style level of thinking, that is, having wonderful debates and having discovery, exploration, rethinking everything. That's not where the church is. The church is still stuck in a system that says, little Johnny, keep your mouth shut, sit in your chair and do your homework. This is why I'm impressed with Dr. Luke. What does this have to do with Jesus? Everything. When you read this document is all about turning the fathers or the hearts of the fathers to the children. That's a game changer. Because before this time, it was to turn the hearts of the children, to make sure that the hearts of the children were consistent with the hearts of the fathers. Let me see if I can deal with a sense of theology that may get you to question. I could start telling this story from the beginning. You know the story that goes like this: in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I could start reading it like this: in the beginning, or once upon a time, God put His sweet little children in the Garden of Eden with the deadliest snake of all. See, that was the theology of the parents. The theology of the parents was, our Father would actually have a child? Where did He have this child? Was it in a safe place? No, it wasn't in a safe place. It was in a chaotic place. In fact, this was the place where God had sent Lucifer. You remember Lucifer. When you read the scripture, Lucifer was the one cast out of heaven for making his argument against God. He had 1/3 of all of the angels, and so his prison became planet Earth. And so we have in the Bible tells us, according to the fathers say that the earth is the prison for Lucifer and all of the rest of the fallen angels. So where does God want to put His first child? He puts His first child, creates him, not in a system by which he can be born as a baby and he can grow and be nurtured by parents and understand how life works. He's not put through that system. He's just instantly born, made out of dirt. And please understand, this is the theology of the fathers. And so we have a father, according to the theology of the fathers, we have a father who simply says, instant presto, magic, first Adam. So the first thing that he does, hey, you need a wife. Here's a wife. Now go play in the garden. By the way, the worst killer of all is in this garden. It's not a big garden, it's a small one. I don't think you're going to find any good parent who would argue that if you knew the worst of killers was in your backyard, if you actually knew that the worst of killers, the one who is extremely deceptive, this snake, if you knew such a horrible snake was out in your backyard, would you actually send your children out there into the backyard to play? And if they got bit, if the snake did bite them, deceive them with that kind of lure, would you judge your children harshly? Would you damn them, or would you question the idea of why you sent your innocent, vulnerable children who had no training? You know, they were not born as babes laying in a manger somewhere, but hey, they were instantly made adults. This is the thing that Luke is saying here. And please keep this in mind as we read this. Luke is saying something that's powerful in chapter 1. Listen, guys, the hearts of the fathers, they must turn to the children. Because the fathers for years had done so many things that were wrong. They had become people who were so stuck in their beliefs they could not move forward. And it took this kind of resolve. This is why Jesus, when he came, he said, I didn't come to bring peace. He's not saying that he's not a peacemaker. He's simply saying, I don't agree with where the fathers are. I came here to bring division between what the fathers are saying and what these children are perceiving. You see, if we read extra biblical literature, if we read all of those manuscripts that most Christians want to avoid and say, oh, they're not part of my Bible, they're not God's Word, damn them. If we read those documents, we're going to find that when Jesus came, and even before Jesus came, children everywhere were starting to ask questions, and that was good. That's why Jesus came and he taught, there is a harvest out there, disciples. People are ready for change. They want to be different. They don't want to be like the fathers. They don't want to be like this theological paradigm that we've had all of our lives. The harvest is right there in front of you. Let's take advantage of this time. The fathers are not going to move. There are some people who are going to serve their fathers all of their lives. And tragically, they will stay in Jerusalem and think that a killing spree is going to be empowered by God so they can kill the Romans, and that's horrible. So Jesus weeps not forever, but he wept for a moment, and then he moved on. The point of this teaching is very much Christmas. Christ did not come 2,000 years ago to say, oh, I'm instantly mature. No, he came as a baby to demonstrate something. It takes time to mature. We don't need a theology that says, oh, instantly we have an adult. He's not going through the maturing process. The best picture for God to present to us was to present to us someone who was born, not born as an adult without any kind of, time to grow and think. This is why I love the passages that talk about sweet Jesus. It's so magnificent. Here we have a model, if you will, of God actually entering the world, and he says, I'm going to go through this learning curve. This is the first time I actually created arms and legs, but I've never had them attached to myself. And so here we find Jesus. He's a human being and very God at the same time, according to some models of theology, which I do agree with. He's exploring the use and the growth of his arm. He's experiencing what eyes can do, what ears can do. He's experiencing the pain. He's experiencing hunger. And this is something that we need to say, wow, this is a wow moment. For when we read extra biblical literature, we're going to find that children for a long time were questioning what the fathers have suggested for centuries. So Jesus didn't come at a time when no one was asking questions. Jesus came at the right time when people were asking questions. I'm talking about the younger generation. Now, the idea of children here is not toddlers. So when we start examining the Bible, we find that Jesus doesn't live a long time. I've often asked that question. Why didn't he live for 70 or 80 or 90 years so he could be a father and speak like a father, be one of these elders in the church old enough to have authority? No, he wanted to speak from the standpoint of someone who was young. When you're 30 years old, you're not respected by most people. That is, in your family. You haven't earned that respect yet. Jesus is trying to make a point with his family. The young are speaking. The young have something that's good to offer. By the time that you're 30 years old, you have a right to say, hey, I question what the fathers have come up with. What's the good news here? If we would practice this simple verse, what would happen? The United States of America, it was based upon certain documents. It was based upon certain fathers. But if we fail to question what the fathers wrote, we will never, never, never move forward ourselves. The same thing is true in Japan. The same thing is true in China. The same thing is true all over the world. Our fathers created governments. Our fathers created military systems that are not good. And at some point, we need to question these models. In university classrooms all over the world, in universities everywhere, people are debating, but you can't have that kind of debate in any kind of military system because you're treated like a child. You're told what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. And so we've created models of institutional living which Jesus was completely opposed to. This is why sweet Jesus came along to nuance the point. We need fathers listening to children because children are painfully aware that we don't need to continue that same mindset that we've had for so long. This is why it was important for John the Baptist to come. He was crying out, not like he knew everything. He was simply saying, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know someone who does. He's asking better questions. What is the one doing who he's talking about? Well, he's talking about someone who came along actually healing people. Here's one who is healing people, raising the dead, actually breaking all kinds of Sabbath laws. He's challenging the theology of the fathers. And John the Baptist is applauding. Not because he's a cousin. In fact, at first, he's not even aware of that. And historically, we don't even know that he ever knew that he was a cousin. I guess my point is we need to see Jesus as he appropriately was and is. Jesus came as one not like the first Adam, who didn't have enough time to mature and was thrown out into the backyard to meet that most deceptive killer, that big talking snake. No, Jesus came as a baby, crying, needs some form of a diaper, plays with other children, experiences life itself. One of the most powerful points that Jesus ever made, he said, guys, I'm speaking to you. You need to become like this child. He didn't say become like me. He didn't say become like God. He said become like the children. Look at this child. This child is not filled full of presupposition. He doesn't have fixed beliefs. Not yet. But if he keeps listening to the theology of our fathers, he's going to be extremely corrupt because he's going to be one who's just like one of Pavlov's dogs. You ring the bell long enough and you'll turn into it. One who just salivates over the ringing of a bell, unfortunately. So what is the good news? As we continue to read, we're going to find that in the 6th month, there was this angel. Now, whether you want to talk about whether it had wings and whether it wasn't an individual or not, that's superfluous to the point. Let's just call this entity Gabriel. Was sent by God to a town in Galilee called Nazareth to a virgin. Now, once again, this is the traditional model of the fathers, not of the sons. What does chapter 1 really nuance? Should we listen to the fathers or should we listen to the children? If we listen to the fathers, we're going to make Mary into a virgin. The problem with making Mary into a virgin, it suggests something that's very typical for the theology of the fathers. For God did not want the sperm of Abraham, nor the egg of Sarah, his wife. God wanted to be all in all. He wanted to be both sperm and egg. He wasn't satisfied with human beings. That was the theology of the fathers. Now, if we are going to deal with something that has a consistent trend, we're going to find that the language of this passage indicates that Jesus did not come from a virgin. For in the ministry of Jesus, Jesus was never afraid of being human. Not somewhat human, but completely human. In fact, if we will study all of the text, not just the biblical text, but the extra-biblical text, so we can wrap our minds around both linguistic and non-linguistic elements to get a true context of Jesus, we're going to find that it's more than reasonable to think that Jesus was simply a human being who had a father by the name of Joseph and who had a mother who was actually Mary. In fact, God was more than privileged to be birthed by two human beings. For the God part, according to theology, wasn't essentially made out of sperm or the egg. The God part was completely separate, according to all theological models. So it's really actually ridiculous to try to insist, oh, this is a mighty working of God's Spirit, spiritual sperm impregnated innocent Mary. That's insulting. There was something that Jesus did throughout his earthly ministry that was so wonderful. He does not do this as a father, as one who could speak from a father's standpoint. He speaks as one who is too young to make doctrine. He can't write doctrine. He's too young. He's too inefficient. He doesn't have the credentials to write theology into the context of the theology of the fathers. But on purpose, he does so. He says, this is the way that it should be done. I'm more than capable of eating with the sinners, drinking with the sinners, washing the feet of the sinners. I'm more than capable of being with sinners. I'm very God, and I'm not put out when I have to be around humanity, for humanity is something that I'm proud of. It's part of me, and I'm part of it. And so when we start drawing concepts like this, oh, God's part of me and I'm part of Him, like Paul writes, that becomes a game changer. God is not trying to say, hey, listen, human beings have never been a part of me, therefore I must be the sperm and the egg, and everything else is just too wicked for me to be a part of it. So you find Jesus not coming to condemn, but Jesus comes and He says, who is it that can condemn? If there's someone who hasn't made a mistake, let that person be the first one to throw the first stone. Jesus isn't condemning the ones who brought the lady. He's simply saying, listen, this is the best thing that you need to do. You need to stop your system of killing sprees. And so what is Christmas about? As I stated before, so many people are really jumping off the boat academically and saying, oh, we don't need Christmas. We do need Christmas because there was historically a Jesus Christ. We have more evidence throughout these manuscripts, whether he existed or not is a subsequent argument, but we have more evidence of a Jesus Christ. We have more evidence of a Jesus Christ who fought extremely hard to say that we need a better way forward and we need to move forward with actually critical honesty. We have Jesus representing that kind of honesty. He nuances this better than anyone else before, and then yet we have people saying today we don't need people screaming out Christmas. Now, I understand we have some fundamentalists who mean something quite different by Christmas, like he was born by a virgin, and he came here to save us from our wickedness, and that he had to satisfy his dear daddy so we could keep that in the traditions or in keeping with the maniacal father that we had in our old covenant theology. What is the good news? The good news is Jesus came and taught us a way to live. How did he teach us to live? He taught us that we would have to go through actually what? Youth. Being born, being a baby, needing a mother, needing a father. And it would take time. He also taught us that not everything would change in our lifetime. As great as he was, everything didn't change in his lifetime. We can argue that, oh, it's a finished work, it's all over, but in reality it's not. We have an opportunity to celebrate Christmas in a wonderful way. Some people would say, oh, Christmas is a pagan holiday with these Christmas trees, etc. Paganism is a myth. Well, have you ever read your Bible? If you've ever read your Bible, it's filled full of myths. So I wouldn't reject Christmas based upon the premise that you're trying to do away with myths. If you're trying to do away with myths, you would have to deal with almost the entire Bible. The point that I'm making is we have a historical Jesus. We can't deny that. And we can't deny that these manuscripts, however difficult they are to understand, we can't deny that when he came, the game changed. Not just in one area concerning how to love people, not just your neighbors, but actually your enemies, not just how to treat people fundamentally every day, but he changed the entire paradigm, if you will. One thing that scientists know that from time to time we do have paradigm shifts. Even our poles, we have polarity changes within this little ball that we call the Earth. And when it does happen, it takes almost 10,000 years, I think, if I'm not mistaken, for the polarity to change. Why am I encouraging time here? Jesus came and encouraged people to be patient. Patient. Lots of patience. He taught not just in words, but he taught us many things in simply being a baby. And at some point in time, I think people who don't believe in God are going to see the power, that is, the powerful things stated when God is capable of being so humble that he doesn't mind being just a baby. Not born of a virgin, but being just a baby out of the womb of Mary and from Joseph. He doesn't mind being connected to humanity. There's nothing essentially wrong with human beings. They do have problems and do wrong, but he doesn't mind being so associated with us that someone might stand up, maybe one young man who had it all wrong, maybe he will stand up and say, since before the beginning, God has always been in us. And I'm going to make this statement, and this statement may upset some of you. But Jesus didn't come along speaking about the Father to say that he has this literal heavenly Father. Jesus came here to say, listen, we have a theology of the fathers. We need a theology from the perspective of a better Father. When Jesus uses the idea of Father and Son, it's metaphor. Jesus uses this in a wonderful in a wonderful way. In other words, sometimes when he's talking to people, he said, your father's the devil. He doesn't mean that there's a literal devil. He's simply saying something has fathered you into thinking things that are completely against what I'm suggesting to be true. So when he spoke of his Father, he did not speak of a literal Godfather. He was simply speaking metaphorically of we need to speak about our theology and how life works from a different kind of father's position, because this is what people could understand back in that day and actually respect. What I'm challenging people to do today is to do what Luke recorded. He said he will go before him in the spirit and power of Elijah and turn the hearts of fathers to the children. I love listening to our children. They are saying more powerful things. They are saying things more powerful than I've ever thought of. My world is changing because I'm listening to my children. My wife makes this point all the time. I'm so wonderful because I've been listening to my kids. When I hear them cry, I'm learning all the time. I see something that I've never seen because I'm listening to my kids. But somehow throughout history, we've had this upside down. We've always listened to the fathers, listened to the fathers, listened to the fathers. But the fathers got stuck in a mindset that was wrong. And so 2,000 years ago, God comes and says, maybe you need to start listening to the children. The children are willing to stretch beyond where you are and give you a chance to have life more abundantly, to give you a chance to live life to its fullest. I love looking at my grandchildren because my grandchildren are much greater than my children. That may insult my children, but they need to get past it because we need to understand that every generation encourages a better sense of civility. We have become a civilized world in a sense, but we need to become more civilized. We have become rational to a certain extent, but it's not going to become completely rational in my lifetime. I need children and my children's children. They need to go past where I am. If we do not encourage that, we lose. This is why Jesus came. He came to nudge the young to keep moving forward and for the old to look at the children and learn. I'm thankful that he didn't come as a mature man instantly. I'm thankful that he came as a baby, willing to be born from that which the Father said God would never have anything to do with. The willingness to be human is powerful. God having that willingness to be human is such a powerful point. God having the willingness to be not just in one who we call Jesus, but He has the willingness to be in you. In fact, Paul says it's not just the willingness, but it's actually true. He is in you. I celebrate Christmas in this sense. It keeps moving forward for me. Jesus isn't just restricted to that Jewish part of humanity, but He enjoys the Swedes and the Norwegians and the rest of mankind. He's connected to us all. This is something that we need to see in this Christmas story. He's connected to us. He's not embarrassed of us. And He certainly wants us to get over our past, because we made mistakes. We thought that God was about sending us out, immature little children, into the garden to confront the deadliest snake, the deceiver of all mankind. And there's something about that we need to laugh about and cry about at the same time. Please help us. Here at the New Covenant Group, we're moving forward. We're listening to our kids. We'll continue to listen to our children and their children. We're going to keep thinking. Why? God wasn't just in a human being, a little Jewish boy 2,000 years ago, but He's in each and every one of us. Thank you for your time.